Okay, welcome everybody. It is a Saturday morning symposium, and I hope you are ready with some questions. Let me take a sip. Coffee. I love it. Okay, so welcome to the symposium. I'm John Branningham, and I run artofcomposing.com. And I do these weekly symposiums, Fridays and Saturdays. I alternate, try to get people in different time zones. But the goal here is just allow you to ask me questions about composition or chat about music or whatever you want. So welcome, everybody. I see Ilka. Welcome. Now's a good time to start submitting your questions in the chat, and we can start diving into it. A little update on what I'm doing. If you watched last week, we talked a lot about models, and specifically this model that I've created on Chopin's Nocturne, Opus 9, number 2, and I'm finding it very fruitful as a way to exercise compositionally, to practice your composing in a logical way that allows you to grow and to absorb the techniques from a composer. Hello, Gregory. Welcome. And this week I have been trying to put together the other side of the equation that really makes the models work well, and that's my original harmony chart, which if you're a member of the Art of Composing Academy, you've seen, or if you've read my diatonic article, you've probably seen it. I am working on turning that into a very useful iOS app. So that will, I think, make it much simpler for somebody who's not very skilled with functional harmony to be able to really, I guess, create chord progressions without fully understanding the theory behind it. Because a lot of times, just the process of creating chord progressions is just knowing where can I go, what's the possibilities of where I can go, and then limiting that possibility to maintain some kind of restriction on yourself, like I'm going to start and end this progression in one key. And being able to create effective chord progressions is a big part of it, is just knowing where you can go. And that's the point of the chord chart, is it shows you easily where the possibilities are so you can start to create some interesting chord progressions. So that's what I've been really diving into this week, which is, just a lot of getting back into coding. I haven't coded for a few months, and diving back into Swift, which is the iOS language. So it's always fun. And I find that learning other fields like programming informs the way I think about composition, because in a sense, programming is really about problem solving, and composition on the surface doesn't seem like it's about problem solving, but a lot of it is. Like I said, your problem may be I start in C and I end in C, and I want to create an interesting chord progression in the middle. Well, that's a problem to solve. It's not just a kind of random creative urge. It's actually, maybe you set limitations on yourself, like I'm going to use no more than 6 chords, and I want one of those chords to be outside of the scale of C major. So there you've got now, a set of restrictions, and it's problem solving. So that's why I do like to think about coding and composition and how they relate. Okay, so let me move on to some questions here. Ilka had posted some questions in the forum. But it looks like you're posting them here, so let's go ahead and answer them now. You say, with modal borrowing, you talk about substituting 6 for a flat 6. Does this rule for flat 6 apply to all keys? Is there a rule to follow with modal borrowing, like flat X? So, yeah, with modal borrowing in particular, what you're doing is you're swapping out one function or one functional chord in a major scale for another function or chord in a minor, or I should say minor key. So if we look at C major, right, let me pull up Sibelius here so we can, give me a second. So if we look at C major, and this will probably be a good time for me to pull out the chord chart as well so I can show you in a minute. But you've got right? You've got 7 chords: C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and then of course C major repeats at the end, keeps on going. And when we're writing functional progressions, we're thinking in a sense about these chords, what their functions are. So we give them each a name, right? 1, 2, or we give them a Roman numeral. And I prefer to show the modality with lowercase and uppercase. I just find it a little bit easier to read. I know a lot of people just use uppercase completely. So let me finish. And of course, back to 1. Now there's an order to these, and it's not the ascending or descending order. There's a specific order that functional harmony really operates in. So if I swap these around, let me go ahead and I'm going to do this. Put those over there and start putting these in proper order. Right now I'm not too concerned about voice leading or anything. 2, 7, 5, 1. Okay, and I left 3 out, and I'll talk about 3 in a minute. But we have as a kind of an archetype of creating your chord progressions, if you put it in what's really a descending third order here. So if you can see, this descends by a third. This would, if it was up here, also descends by a third. You can see it just keeps going, descending by thirds. I'm just trying to keep it all within a reasonable thing here so you can see it in root position. So we've got this progression. And I added a 7th to the G there, but that's if you can remember that progression, and then remember that you can always leave a chord out but always go in the same direction, you're one step to creating really good chord progressions, right? So I can go 1 to 6 right here, but then I could skip 4 and just go to 2. I could skip 7, just go to 5, and then 1. Now, there's a lot of other things you can do on top of this progression to make it interesting. It's adding applied dominance, adding applied 7th chords, and then modal borrowing is one of the techniques that we use. And if we were to change these all to, in fact, let me do this. I'm going to change this now to C minor. Where is it? And then change these notes here. Let's see. Okay, so now we've got a different progression. We've got 1, we've got 6 as a major chord. Now, when Ilka asks this question, he asks about flat 6. We say flat 6 when we're talking about modal borrowing because the actual root in major is an A, and in C minor, it's an A flat. So if you're modally borrowing, we'll call it flat 6. If you're in C minor, it's just 6. And 4 becomes minor. 2 actually becomes half diminish. 7 we leave as diminish, and 5 we leave as major because we want that leading tone, right? That 7 to 1 sound. And then of course this becomes minor. So when you're modally borrowing, if you write a progression, right? That's 1, 4, 1, right? It's a neighbor chord. If I wanted to modally borrow, just change it to a minor chord, right? Because 4 is minor in C minor. Let's pop out the chat here. Now, if I want to modally borrow 6, right? So that progression was just 1, 6, 2, 5, 7, 1. Modally borrowing 6, you would actually just change it to whatever the 6th chord is in the minor. So this is, you get that chromatic mediant sound. But you can see the progression still works in the same way. If I write it out, let me change down here to C major. So if I were to write it out here, I need to put this down in the, I'll just do this like this. So a little bit of voice leading now. So here's 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, right? Modally borrowing, though, change. Oop, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Change all those to flat. The progression still works the same way. We just modally borrowed 1 chord. And it gives it a little bit kind of more, I don't know, unique sound to it, or it's a little bit more foreign to our ears to just modally borrow straight like that. So I don't know, Ilka, if that answers your question. It really depends on, like, it's not always a flat 6. It's not always 2 becomes flat 2, right? It's just whatever the chord is in the other key. So if we were to borrow the 2 chord, it'd actually be a diminish, or if you've got a 7th chord, half diminished, right? And we could mix that in back with the original A minor. Now, if this is a sharp key kind of thing, right, then it may not be called a flat 6. You may call it a natural 6, if that's your question. And it may be confusing. You know, you're just taking the 6th chord from the minor key. So if it's getting confusing about terminology in terms of, do I call it a flat 6? Do I call it a 6 with the major, you know, like a capital 6 instead of a flat with a capital, 6 Roman numeral? Then I would say just get comfortable with what the actual notes are doing, right? And then worry about the theory later on. The theory is just a way of describing what the notes are doing. And if you're getting confused about the way I wrote it, the way, everybody, you check 6 different books and they've got 6 different answers about the thing. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter as long as your brain knows what the notes have to do to make it sound the way you want it to sound. In a sense, that's the craft that you really need to build. You could call it a modal 6 if you wanted to, or you could call it a super 6. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you're taking it from that key and not from the major key. So hopefully that answers your question, and hopefully that was interesting for people who haven't done the harmony stuff. So yeah. And I believe you had another question in the forums too. I'm not sure if you want me to answer it here. If I don't get to your question very quickly, if you post about the forums, I tend to group things on Mondays and try to answer all the questions on Mondays. But I think it was something about applied dominance. Let me see. Let's see. How are applied dominants considered as chord progression functions? Should I consider them as functions to the chord progression or always as a dominant? Okay, so yeah, applied dominants really act as dominants. So you're pretending to be within that key for that moment. So let's go ahead and expand this out just a little bit. Let's see. We'll do this. So, you know, I'm going to put the Roman numerals here too. So we're 1, then we've got 6, we got 2 half diminished, then we got a 5, 7, and we got a 1. And what we're talking about when we talk about applied dominance is that if you look at C major, so let me write out C major again over here. And in fact, I'm just going to change the key again. Remove that. So if we're in the key of C major here, we've got a tonic chord, right? That's the first chord built off of the tonic note. And we've got the dominant chord here, and they're kind of the like polar opposites in the key. Right? A lot of music is based almost purely on 1-5 sometimes. You'll see entire themes that just kind of bounce back and forth between 1 and 5. Well, when we talk about an applied dominant, what we're doing is we're saying we want to get that dominant sound, right? And in this sense, it's the dominant quality of it, not necessarily the scale degree within the key that you're in. You're looking for that dominant sound, but applied to another chord, right? So the way you do that is you pretend to be in that key for a moment. So if we want to get the applied dominant of 6, right, we have to pretend for a moment that we are in the key of A minor, and it's going to look like this. We got so it's harmonic minor, meaning that we've got a sharp 3, right? We've in the dominant. We want it to get that major dominant sound, even though in the key signature itself there's no G sharp. So if we want to get the applied dominant to that, we pretend we're in the key of A minor for a minute, and we find the dominant chord here, and we put it here. Right? Stop. I'm going to do some shifting around. Just give it a little more interest here. And what that is, it's an E major chord, right? But we wouldn't write it like this, kind of applicable to the last question. We wouldn't write it like that, although I've seen it written like that. But the function of it is not a 3 chord that's in major, right? Which isn't really a function. What it is a 5 of 6. So the function itself applies to the 6 chord, not to the functional categories within C major. So this can be confusing for a lot of people, and I admit that the concepts of it are confusing in themselves. And I was actually reading a paper this last week about somebody who thinks that the term function is so loaded with too many meanings that it's completely lost its meaning. And he wants to split up the function term into several other terms. And I agree in some sense. I don't want to necessarily jump on all the terms that he put out there, but I do like them. Some of them are like kinship, where it maybe will hold, or it'll have notes that are the same between 2 chords. So you may have a dominant kinship between an A flat 7, right, and an augmented 6 chord because they share a lot of notes, but the function is going to be not the same for those 2 chords. So I think the ideas are interesting. Either way, that's a tangent. So an applied dominant, the function applies to the chord that is the dominant for, not to C major. And that's how you should really be thinking of them if you're writing standard diatonic functional or chromatic functional harmony. So like if you're writing functional chord progressions that have a point A to point B kind of motion, think of the functions like that. Now, if you start to venture off into other styles of harmony, like impressionistic, it may get a little bit messy if you try to always figure out the function of the chord, because sometimes it's a non-functional progression. I mean, you may have something like, right? Those are all just I'm just doing kind of dominant sound planing. So, or those are dominant ninths. Right? It's got this kind of Debussy style impressionistic sound. But if I were to try to say that, oh, this is 5 of 4 leading to 5 of 5 leading to 5 of flat 7 back to 5 of 5, it's just going to get so messy that I would just at that point abandon trying to give it a functional label and just call it what it is. That's a C9 chord, D9, E flat 9, D9 again. And in a sense, that's what I'll do when I'm sketching. If I'm writing something, I will, if I can, write the function, right? I tend to analyze as I go, like write it down, because it's good for my brain to be able to see, oh, I do understand actually the notes that I'm writing down, and it's not just happenstance or random. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll write, something like that, right? Now, if you can tell me what the function of this chord is, you're a much better theorist than I am. And the thing is, it may not have a function. I mean, I've got B flat E, and then I got F sharp A, B, D, right? I may just like the sound. So in that case, I'll just write those notes down, and I won't worry about labeling it in anything. But then maybe I'll do something like, let's see, that. There we go, is an A flat minor 7 chord. I may not be able to figure out what the function is based off of what came before and where it's going afterwards, right? Maybe I do something like that. Functionally, it's going to be very ambiguous. So I'll just write A flat minor 7 at that point. And I end up getting, these kind of, let me write that out what I did. Let's see, it was like some random, put these down here, make it a little more readable. Something like that. And then let's say I change this to that A flat minor 7. In this case, I wouldn't give it a Roman numeral. I just call it A flat minor 7, something like that. So there we go. Sibelius puts it up top. But that may be how I actually sit down, and when I'm sketching, if I'm trying to analyze what I wrote, that's what it may look like. It may look like some chords that make sense to my brain, then this random chord that doesn't make sense to my brain in terms of what it's theoretically doing. And then I've got another chord that I know the quality of the chord, right? I know I wanted this sound, but I don't know how to label it functionally, so I just call it A flat minor 7 and then back to another functional chord. And being able to do that is actually good because you can see, where am I breaking away from functionality? Where is my harmony becoming a little bit more ambiguous, maybe more modern, versus when do I pull the listener back in? I see this a lot in Ravel's writing, where it'll feel like he's getting out of place, this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you'll hear a 2-5, and it's like, oh, I know where I am now again, even with all, that's kind of jazz-ish sounding, but I guess the key is always being flexible with your analysis. You don't, it's good to learn analytical systems. It's good to understand, how would, William Kaplan look at this theme and decide that this is a basic idea and this is or it's a compound basic idea and maybe a continuation or something. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to always stick to what somebody's told you is the way to write down an analysis. If it makes sense to you, then I would say it works as an analysis. If you can, and my big test, this is always my test, is can I turn around and use that in a different context and it still has the same feel and sound. And just this last, just a couple days ago, I was going through a cue by John Williams called Journey to the Island from Jurassic Park, which is a really cool cue. It just goes all over the place. It's got both of the kind of main themes from Jurassic Park. I've always loved it. The orchestration's great. But the opening is to me, it's a little bit ambiguous, and I've always wondered, what is going on there? And the way I have analyzed it is that he's really focusing around this harmony and jumping around in major and minor thirds modulation. So, he's got going on as a pedal. It's actually in the viola. So hopefully you know that theme. But when you kind of add everything up, it sounds like this. And he's really focusing on this harmony, but he's doing it in kind of interesting ways, not trying to make it feel like he's rooted in G major. So he has you focus on that. And then from there, I think he moves to E flat major. Or no, I think it's E major. And it's when you jump around in those harmonies, and this chord that I'm playing, if you're curious, I'm trying to give it a name because what it really is a G major 7 chord. Let me take it up there with a suspended second. So instead of a third, right? He takes it away and makes it an A here. So you could look at it in a couple ways. You could say it's a D chord over G, right? You could call it a G major 7 with a suspended second. But I don't like either one of those, so I don't have a name for it yet. But what I've been doing is just writing it as a like the delta symbol, which I don't know if you can see. Let's see if you can see that. I've been writing it as an upside down delta symbol. So the delta symbol is the major 7th symbol. Let's see. I don't know if it's in Sibelius here. See. No, it doesn't. I think it's in here somewhere, but I'm not sure how to bring it up. And for some reason, right click doesn't work on that. So I don't have a great name for it, but it's a really cool sound. All right. And he's just jumping around in that harmony, right? Going around to different key areas. So that's E major. Then he does it in C major, I believe. And he goes back up to E flat major, like that. So, and if you turn around, though, and you try to write with it, you get this kind of ambiguous floating feeling that doesn't seem to want to resolve anywhere, which is, I think, what he was really going after. He had to cover kind of a long time span. I'm not sure how many. It's like a minute or two, where they're just conversing in the helicopter, and you want to feel like it's going somewhere, but not necessarily going anywhere musically. So you can take that, but then the other side of it was, what was he doing with the melody? And I kind of came to the conclusion that it felt like he was writing in Dorian mode. And he was only using G and B, which is the root and the third in the chord, as passing tones. Right? If you land on that too much, it's going to feel like that's where you're going. You want to avoid that. So he sticks to, those other chord tones. So that was kind of my own personal analysis of it. But when I sat down to try to do something similar, I found that it was working. The technique that I identified in there that I thought would work seems to be working. Does that mean that's what John Williams thought about when he was writing it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to say. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter if you feel that it works for you. And it may not work exactly the same way for somebody else hearing the music that you're writing, but that doesn't matter that much either because it's your music. You can do whatever you want with it. And if you like the way it sounds, then you should just go with it. So that's why I say everybody needs to be doing their own analysis of pieces to try to figure out what it is that you like about that piece and what you feel is the core, the heart of the idea there. And if you can do that and then turn around and use it yourself, then you've done good analysis. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says about your analysis. If you post it online, somebody's going to say it's like, oh, well, you should have labeled that a 2 with a plus, with a slash through it and over a C, whatever, and had the wrong colon. It doesn't matter. It just absolutely doesn't matter. These are all just people coming up with their own systems. What matters is it the sound and feel that you want? And this sound right here is just so flexible. It's just a really cool sound. And I wouldn't have really locked it in if I hadn't sat down and really tried to figure it out. Now, I've heard this chord before, but it was great to see how is he using it. So yeah, that was my little spiel on doing your own analysis. Ilka, once again, I go on tangents, so let me know if that answered your questions about how to analyze the function. I don't necessarily always write, T, P, or D underneath it, because what you end up getting is a lot of D's all over the place. But if you write it as 5 of 2, whatever, it's a dominant function. It's pulling you back to the tonic that is that chord. But once you get back to that chord, it's not actually a tonic. It's just whatever it is in the key. Noodling. I like to noodle. Okay, so go ahead and post some more questions if you got them. We're about a half hour in, so I normally go about an hour. I'll see if there's anything else in the forums. I think there may be. Let's see. Oh, you asked a question also about harmonic minor. Let's see. In minor scales that include flats, like D minor, should one use C sharp to have a melodic minor scale as sharp? This will make the scale look a bit odd, as you'll have a B flat, C sharp D, or notated D flat. Yeah, what you need to do is use C sharp, because it becomes important when you're thinking about intervals. So if you look at a scale like D minor, right? Let's do this. Right, if we just do kind of the natural Dorian mode here, right? You've got, if you want to calculate intervals properly within the key, if you use D flat, this is an octave. But in reality, it's not functioning as an octave. It's functioning as a major seventh above the tonic or above the root. So so that's why it's critical to use the right letter names first, and then to figure out how do you apply the accidental. And now that's not to say if you're writing a piece in D minor and the situation arises maybe where you've got a descending line, like, let's see. I need to change that. If you've got a descending line like this, then yeah, it makes a lot more sense to use D flat in that sense, or in this situation, just because of readability. Doing that, you've got an augmented, a diminished third, right? You don't want that. And then here, it just becomes a lot more readable that way. So in that situation, yeah, you may use it. And yeah, it's just it's one of those things too. Always, the theory is important when you're writing, but often when you're preparing your score for a performer to play it, it may not necessarily be the theoretical answer that works the best for reading it. And you have to balance out those two things. I mean, often they are the same thing, but occasionally they're not. And especially if you've got multiple parts, so you got one player playing an ascending line, another player playing a descending line at the same time. One person may have a D flat, the other person has a C sharp, and to your brain, when you're reading your score, you're like, I can't stand this, looking at this, because you want to make them work together. However, if it makes more sense for the player readability wise, leave it as it is, so that you don't have to. You reduce the chance of having a mistake, and especially when it's going to live players, you want to avoid potential mistakes as much as possible. It eats up time, eats up money, and it frustrates the players, and it frustrates you because now they have to ask you questions, things like that. So yeah, I think I got all your questions that you posted in the forum, and thanks for sending those over. And if you're watching right now on YouTube Live, please post your questions, because if not, I tend to run out of things to say. I give my little spiel at the beginning, and I've got nothing to spiel about now. Frederick is asking if he could send me his piece to look over. Sure, why not? I think now is a good time. I would prefer if you send it as music XML, unless you are using Sibelius. If you're using Sibelius, I'm on 7.1.3. I haven't upgraded, just because there's other things that I don't want to upgrade on my computer. I don't want to mess with my system. Plus, it all costs money. So you either have to send me an old Sibelius version 7 file, or if you give me a music XML, I know it'll work. So yes, if you're watching and you want to send me a piece, go ahead, email it in, john.branningham@artofcomposing.com. I'll post it here in the chat. Let's see. So yeah, send it over and I will check it out. I think people enjoy that process. Yes, Sibelius 8 can, Gregor pointed out, Sibelius 8 can export to earlier versions. However, I found that when I tell people, give me Sibelius 7, they tend to give me Sibelius 7.5, and it's confusing. And then it's like 4 more emails go back and forth. So send me whatever, but make sure the music XML file's in there. That way I've got the backup. I can always import music XML. So, I wanted to say thank you to Gregory Moore for sending me tips on soldering my motherboard. It did not work out for me all that well. I could not get a good solder connection on my. I broke a connector when I was changing out a hard drive. That's kind of the backstory. And I could not get a good connection without bridges on these little feet for something called the LVDS. So I think I'm going to have to find a Mac repair person here in LA to do it. But it was a fun learning experience, a little bit nerve-wracking. But I'm starting to pick up soldering a little bit better, which is good because I've got a plan to make a synthesizer with my son. So we're learning about electronics right now. And let's see. Okay, so it looks like I've got the music XML. Yeah, it's not a big deal about the soldering though. I still have an external monitor on my computer that I can hook up. The LVDS is what connects you to the internal monitor, which sucks. I don't have that right now, and now I can only have one monitor, whereas before I had two. But it still works. So let me go ahead and pull up this other one here, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's see. Get this centered. There we go. Okay. So let me optimize staff spacing, and I'm going to put it in this here. Okay, so this is good. It's one of the problems with getting XML, sometimes the formatting is a little bit off, But and sometimes it doesn't read things properly, like chord progressions here. But nonetheless, let's listen. Okay, I think I'll stop it there. Just save some time, but well done. Very nice piece. I'll just start off and say that I really enjoyed it. I think you did a great job. You clearly took care in writing out the counter melodies and the counterpoint in the piano versus the flute, and your harmony is fantastic. It works really well. You got a lot of applied dominance and seventh chords, and things just move around in a very logical and flowing kind of way. So well done. I don't have a whole lot of critique for it. I think there may be some issues of being able to hear the flute when you have the piano playing forte and the flute in this part of the register. It's not horrible. Down here, you're going to probably not hear this. So, one answer could be just taking this up an octave like this, because it's kind of a big moment, and going down low in the flute right there may be it just may be inaudible against a piano, which a piano can actually be quite loud. So if you listen to it now. Yeah, other than that, I think you did a fantastic job. And I'm going to assume that within your notation software, things look a little bit cleaner here. If you're preparing this for somebody to play, I would hide the analysis so that you have a playable version, but the analysis, it's not necessary to always keep the analysis on there. You can delete it if you fully understand your piece. And it is obvious to me that you really fully understand what's going on in your piece, and I think that's the critical thing. I'm curious how long you spent on this piece, because to me it seems like it has a lot of care and attention to detail, and that often is the critical aspect in good music. It's not so much the idea that you're working on, but it's the care that you take to bring that idea into, its full capacity as an idea. I mean, who's to say that is a good idea or a bad idea, or right? But in the hands of the right composer, right? A simple idea can be something amazing. And it's about taking the care and taking the time, thinking about the parts, thinking about what the players having to deal with when they play. At this point, if this was my composition, I would really start experimenting with textures and range and things like that. If, like, for instance, here where the piano is building up, you've got an opportunity where you've repeated the same thing 3 times, and if you find that you're repeating yourself exactly, that's an opportunity for you to add a little bit of more interest to it. So it could be as simple as adding octaves right there, or adding an octave to the bottom here, like that. If we listen now. Right, and what that did is it brought in contrast still, even within the same area that you have, or the repetition. So there's still a lot that you can do with this piece. And I know there's always this balance of how much time do I spend on one piece in particular versus moving on now that you understand what's going on here. But I think there's so much potential in this piece that you really should take the time to start experimenting with some other things, so maybe even something like this where let's see, something kind of cool, maybe take this, put that in the right hand, right? You have to change clef for a minute, and once again you'd have to take a little bit of time to mess around with the part, but maybe doing a trill up here to give it a little bit more, fluttery motion while the flutes do something like this. Right now, my transition back to this spot right here wasn't all that nuanced, and maybe it's something like this, But dropping out, taking away notes. Never be afraid to take away some notes. Oh. Okay, somebody is saying the video froze, but sound is good. Hold on. I'm not sure why. It's saying my stream health is low. I have a feeling it is the... my internet connection, probably. I don't know if something else is getting in the way. Give me a second. Hold on. Maybe I can unfreeze the camera. Okay, I don't know then. As long as you could see Sibelius, then that's a good thing. Let's see, is that still... Okay, well, everybody's telling me they can still hear me, but my video froze. So I'm going to take a look at my video settings later, why it's not working. But nonetheless, messing around with those kind of ideas is always a good thing. And I wonder if there's a way for me to fix my video now. Now I'm a little bit disappointed. Okay, well, either way, Frederick, thanks for sending the piece over. I think it's a very good job, and you clearly understood the harmony and the form and the idea behind how we're writing small ternary form and why it's a good form to practice short pieces like this, because it gives you opportunities, gives you areas to develop things, mess around with textures and harmonies and tonality, things like that. So very good job. Let me go ahead and see if real quick I can do something. Let's see. Maybe it has to do with my video resolution. And let me go back to, okay, I'm not seeing my video program here. Apologies for this. Let's see, show all windows. Okay. Why don't we do this? I'm going to end this stream, and I'm going to start up another stream. So if you're still listening, let's go ahead and start up another stream. So I'll be right back.